Mom, please, I begged, clutching my backpack as the winter wind whipped around us. It's freezing out here. You can't be serious. But my mother's face remained stone cold as she stood in the doorway of our family home, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. We are serious, Victoria, my father's voice boomed from behind her. If you won't take over the family business like your sister agreed to, then you're no longer welcome here. We didn't raise you to be this selfish. My name is Victoria Bennett, and at 18, I was being kicked out of my home on a freezing December night because I dared to dream of something different from what my parents had planned for me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just yesterday, my sister Emma had been celebrated with champagne and a fancy dinner for agreeing to step into our father's role at Bennett Industries. Meanwhile, my acceptance letter to medical school might as well have been a death sentence. The business needs both of you, my father continued, his voice hard with disappointment. Emma can't do this alone. She needs her sister. The company needs both Bennett daughters. I want to save lives, Dad, I said, my voice cracking. Being a doctor is all I've ever wanted. And what about the lives of our employees? He shot back. The families that depend on Bennett Industries. Your sister understands responsibility. She understands legacy. You're just being selfish. My mother's silence hurt more than my father's words. She'd always been the mediator, the voice of reason. But now she stood there, a silent sentinel, guarding the door against her own daughter. Fine, I whispered, straightening my spine. If that's how you feel, I'll go. But remember this moment. Remember you chose this. As I turned to leave, Emma appeared at the top of the stairs. My twin sister, older by just 3 minutes, looked down at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. You brought this on yourself, Vicky, she called out. But don't worry, I'll take good care of your share of the company. The door slammed behind me with a finality that echoed through my bones. I had $2,000 in savings, a full scholarship to medical school, and a broken heart. What I didn't have was a family anymore. That was 8 years ago. Now, as I sit in my office at Mount Sinai Hospital, looking at the email from my mother, I can't help but laugh at life's strange twists. Dearest Victoria, we heard through family friends about your engagement to James. Your father and I would very much like to attend the celebration. We've missed you terribly, and perhaps it's time to put the past behind us. Family should be together for such important moments. Love, Mom. 8 years of silence, broken because they'd heard I was marrying James Wilson, though they had no idea who he really was. They probably thought I was marrying a regular doctor. After all, that's what most people assumed when they met him. James preferred it that way. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. So little sister finally landed herself a doctor. Can't wait to meet him. Mom says you have to invite me to the engagement party. I smiled, thinking about what they didn't know. James wasn't just a doctor. He was also the CEO of Wilson Healthcare, one of the largest healthcare conglomerates in the country. And 3 days ago, his company had completed a hostile takeover of Bennett Industries. My parents and sister didn't know yet. The paperwork wouldn't be public for another week. They had no idea they were about to lose everything they'd chosen over me. Dr. Bennett, my assistant Sarah, poked her head in. Mr. Wilson is here to see you. James walked in, his presence filling the room as always. At 35, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built an empire from the ground up. He loosened his tie as he crossed the room to kiss me. I take it you got their email? He asked, noticing my expression. I nodded, turning my laptop to show him. 8 years of nothing, and now suddenly they want to be family again. Emma even texted me. James sat on the edge of my desk, his face thoughtful. And what do you want to do about it? I leaned back in my chair, considering the question. Part of me wants to ignore them, just like they ignored me for 8 years. No calls on my birthdays, no response when I graduated top of my class. Nothing when I became the youngest head of neurosurgery at Mount Sinai. But, James prompted gently, but another part of me wants them to come to the engagement party. I want them to see everything I've built without them. I want them to realize what they threw away that night. James took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. They'll find out about the takeover soon. Your father's been calling my office all week, trying to schedule a meeting with the mysterious buyer. He has no idea he's been dealing with my team for months. I thought about my father, always so proud, so certain he knew best. He'd been running Bennett Industries into the ground for years, too stubborn to modernize, too set in his ways to see the changing market. Emma, for all her business school education, hadn't helped. She was too busy playing corporate princess to actually learn the business. You know, James continued, we don't have to go through with the takeover. Say the word, and I'll stop it. We can find another way to expand Wilson Healthcare. I shook my head. No, it's not about revenge. Bennett Industries has been failing for years. The employees deserve better leadership. You'll save more jobs this way than if we let my father run it into bankruptcy. James nodded, understanding as always. He'd built his company on the principle of saving both lives and livelihoods. That shared belief, that healthcare should be about more than just profit, was what had drawn us together when we met at a medical conference 3 years ago. So, he said, pulling me up from my chair, shall I tell my assistant to add 3 more names to the engagement party guest list? I looked at my mother's email again, then at Emma's text. They had no idea what was coming, no idea that the daughter they'd thrown away had not only succeeded, but had found someone who valued both her dreams and her worth. Yes, I decided. Add them to the list, but don't send the invitation yet. Let's wait until after the takeover announcement. I want them to know exactly who they're dealing with when they RSVP. James pulled me close, kissing my forehead. Have I told you lately how much I love your strategic mind, Dr. Bennett? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Almost as much as I love your timing, Mr. Wilson. Later that evening, as I drove home to our penthouse apartment, I thought about the night they kicked me out. I remembered standing in the cold, watching my childhood home disappear in my rearview mirror, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Now, 8 years later, I was one of the country's top neurosurgeons, engaged to a man who supported all my dreams, and about to show my family exactly what they'd lost when they chose the business over me. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Emma. Heard your fiance's a real catch. Hope he's ready to deal with the Bennett family drama. Detail, Dad's freaking out about some corporate takeover rumors. You should come by the office, help your big sister figure out what's going on. I smiled, thinking about the boardroom meeting scheduled for next week. Emma had no idea she'd be seeing me sooner than she thought, and under very different circumstances than she imagined. Sometimes I mused karma doesn't just come around. It comes around with compound interest. As I pulled into our building's garage, I saw James's car already there. He probably ordered dinner in, knowing I'd want to talk through everything. That's what I loved about him. He always knew what I needed, even before I did. Upstairs, I found him in his home office, papers spread across his desk. The takeover documents, I realized, spotting Bennett Industries' logo. Your father called again, he said, looking up. Offered to sell at twice the market value if we keep him on as CEO. I sat on the edge of his desk, much like he'd done in my office earlier. And what did your team say? That the current offer is final, and the terms are non-negotiable. He gathered the papers into a neat stack. He's desperate, Victoria. The company's in worse shape than we thought. Emma's latest innovative marketing campaign burned through their emergency reserves. I wasn't surprised. Emma had always been better at spending money than making it. She probably thought her latest idea would save the company, just like all her other failed initiatives. You know what's ironic? I said, picking up a photo from his desk, us at the hospital fundraiser where we first met. If they'd supported my dream of being a doctor, they might have had someone who actually understood the medical supply side of their business. Maybe then they wouldn't be in this mess. James stood, pulling me into his arms. Their loss was my gain. I got the brilliant doctor and the chance to fix their company. I leaned into him, grateful for this man who had seen me clearly from the very beginning. When did you know? I asked. About Bennett Industries being my family's company. He laughed softly, about 2 minutes after we met. Dr. Victoria Bennett, brilliant neurosurgeon who never talked about her family. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. But I fell in love with you long before I knew about any of that. And the takeover. That was just good business sense. The company's got good bones. It just needs proper management. The fact that it lets me help right an old wrong is just a bonus. I pulled back to look at him. You're too good to me. No, he said seriously. I'm exactly as good as you deserve. Now how about we plan this engagement party? I think it's time to show your family exactly what success looks like. As we sat down to dinner, I couldn't help but think about how different this was from that cold December night 8 years ago. I'd lost a family that didn't value me, but I'd built something better. A life filled with purpose, love, and the kind of success my parents never imagined for me. The engagement party would be more than just a celebration. It would be a reckoning, a moment of truth where my past and present would collide. And for once, I was ready for the storm. My phone buzzed one more time, a final text from Emma. Dad's calling an emergency board meeting for next week. Something big is happening. Sure you don't want to come help your sister out? I showed the message to James, who smiled knowingly. Should we tell her she'll be seeing you at the board meeting anyway? No, I replied, turning off my phone. Let them sweat it out a little longer. They made me wait 8 years. They can wait another week. The stage was set, the players were in position, and soon, very soon, my family would learn that the daughter they discarded had become more powerful than they could have imagined. But first, we had an engagement party to plan. The Bennett Industries boardroom hadn't changed in 8 years. The same mahogany table dominated the space, the same pretentious oil paintings lined the walls, and the same air of antiquated privilege hung thick in the air. I stood in the empty room, running my finger along the polished wood, remembering how many times I played under this table as a child while my father held his meetings. Ready? James asked, adjusting his tie as he entered. I smoothed down my silk blouse and checked my reflection in the window. As ready as I'll ever be. We'd arrived early deliberately. James's team would enter first, followed by the Bennett Industries board members. My family would be last. My father always liked to make an entrance. Right on cue, James's executives filed in, nodding respectfully to both of us. Then came the board members, most of whom did a double take when they saw me. Old Mr. Peterson, who'd known me since I was a child, actually stopped in his tracks. Victoria, he said, clearly confused. What are you? Before he could finish, my father's voice boomed from the doorway. What is the meaning of this? Why wasn't I informed about? He froze mid-sentence, his eyes landing on me. Emma crashed into his back, not expecting his sudden stop. She peered around him, her perfectly made-up face contorting in shock. Vicky. Hello, family, I said calmly. Please, take your seats. We have a lot to discuss. My mother, entering last, ripped the doorframe for support. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but then I remembered her silence the night they threw me out. What are you doing here? My father demanded, recovering his composure. This is a private board meeting. James stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. Mr. Bennett, I believe you've been trying to reach me. I'm James Wilson, CEO of Wilson Healthcare and your daughter Victoria's fiancé. The color drained from my father's face. Emma's mouth fell open in a most unladylike manner. My mother sank into the nearest chair. You're the buyer? My father whispered. Please, James gestured to the remaining seats. Let's discuss this professionally. The next hour was both excruciating and oddly satisfying. James's team presented the takeover details with clinical precision. The numbers were damning: years of mismanagement, failed initiatives, and declining market share. Emma squirmed in her seat as her recent failures were laid bare in PowerPoint slides and profit-loss charts. This is impossible, my father interrupted, his voice hoarse. You can't just take my company. Our company, Emma added quickly, shooting me a venomous look. James remained perfectly calm. Actually, we can, and we have. The board has already approved the sale. Your minority shareholders jumped our offer weeks ago. As of 9 this morning, Wilson Healthcare owns 51% of Bennett Industries. You orchestrated this, Emma accused, pointing at me. You're trying to steal what's rightfully mine. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. Rightfully yours. Like the family that was rightfully mine before you all threw me away. That's different, she sputtered. You abandoned us. No, Emma, you all abandoned me. Because I wanted to be a doctor instead of following Dad's plans. Well, guess what? I became a doctor, a damn good one. And I found someone who values that about me. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is preposterous. I'll fight this. You'll what, Dad? I cut in. Burn through more company money with legal fees. The company you can barely keep afloat. James is offering to keep most of the employees, maintain the Bennett name as a subsidiary. He's being more than fair. Fair, he spat. He's stealing my legacy. No, James interjected firmly. I'm saving it. The company's 3 months away from bankruptcy. Your employees are about to lose everything. This acquisition saves jobs, maintains the brand, and gives shareholders a chance to recover their investments. My mother, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke. Did you know? She asked me softly. When you received my email about the engagement party, did you know this was happening? I met her gaze steadily. Yes. Just like you knew what you were doing when you let Dad throw me out that night. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Speaking of the engagement party, I continued, pulling envelopes from my briefcase. Here are your invitations. James thought it would be more personal to deliver them in person. Emma laughed bitterly. You're really going to invite us? After this? Of course, I replied, my voice sweet. After all, family should be together for such important moments. Isn't that what your email said, Mom? My father stared at the invitation in front of him like it might bite. This is your revenge, then? Humiliate us at your party? No, Dad, this is me showing you what success really looks like. Success isn't just about profit margins and family legacy. It's about building something meaningful. James and I are doing that together. The party is just a celebration of that fact. The choice is yours, James added. Attend or don't. But either way, on Monday, I'll be announcing the acquisition and my plans for the company's future. A future that could include you all in different roles if you're willing to adapt. Emma's head snapped up. Different roles? You didn't think you'd keep your CEO position, did you? I asked, unable to resist the dig. Don't worry though, the marketing department always needs assistance. She stood up so fast her chair toppled over. I hate you, she hissed. I've always hated you. Little Miss Perfect, always thinking you're better than everyone else. No, Emma. I never thought I was better. I just wanted to be different. You're the one who always needed to feel superior. The meeting wrapped up shortly after that. James's team distributed the final paperwork while my family sat in stunned silence. As we prepared to leave, my mother caught my arm. Victoria, please, she whispered. Can't we talk about this? I gently removed her hand. We can. At the engagement party, if you choose to come. Outside the boardroom, James pulled me into an empty office. You okay? I let out a shaky breath. I didn't expect it to feel like this. I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated. Instead, I just feel sad, he offered. There's still your family, Vic. It's okay to feel complicated about this. I leaned into his chest, letting his heartbeat steady me. Does this make me as bad as them? Using business to hurt family? He pulled back to look at me. No. We're saving a failing company, protecting jobs, and yes, showing your family the consequences of their choices. That's not spite, that's justice. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. I hope you're happy. Dad's having chest pains because of you. They'll never change, will they? I showed James the message. Maybe not, he agreed. But that's not your responsibility anymore. You've built your own life, your own success. They can either accept that or not. As we left Bennett Industries, possibly for the last time, I caught my reflection in the lobby mirrors. I didn't see the scared 18-year-old girl from that winter night. I saw a strong, successful woman who had overcome every obstacle thrown in her path. The engagement party was in 2 weeks. My family had until then to decide if they could accept this new reality. Either way, I would be celebrating with the family I'd chosen, James, my hospital colleagues, the friends who'd supported me through medical school. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. I'm sorry, sweetheart, for everything. Please, can we try to fix this? I showed it to James, who squeezed my hand supportively. What do you want to do? I thought about it as we walked to our car. I want to give them a chance, I finally said. One chance to prove they can change. But this time, it's on my terms. Then that's what we'll do, he said simply. And this time, I wouldn't be the one begging to belong. The 2 weeks leading up to the engagement party felt like walking through an emotional minefield. Every day brought new attempts from my family to regain control of the situation. First came the guilt trips from my mother. She showed up at the hospital during my lunch break, carrying an old photo album. Look, she said, flipping through pages of childhood memories. Remember how close you and Emma used to be. Before all this, competition started. I glanced at a photo of Emma and me on our 10th birthday, wearing matching dresses and identical smiles. Me before you and Dad started playing favorites. She flinched but pressed on. We just wanted what was best for both of you. No, I corrected, closing the album. You wanted what was best for the business. Emma was just willing to play along. Next came Emma's attempts at manipulation. She cornered me outside my favorite coffee shop, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. "I'll lose everything," she pleaded. "My position, my reputation. Can't you talk to James? Make him understand I can run the company. Like you've been running it into the ground for the past 3 years?" I asked, stirring my latte. "The company's bleeding money, Emma. Your last 3 initiatives lost millions." "I was trying something new," she protested. "No, you were playing CEO without doing the work. Just like always." She grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. "You think you're so perfect now, don't you? With your doctor fiancé and your fancy career? But I remember when you used to cry yourself to sleep because you couldn't understand Dad's business reports." I gently removed her hand. "The difference is, I chose to pursue what I was good at instead of trying to be something I'm not." My father's approach was more direct. He showed up at our penthouse one evening, demanding to speak with James. "I built that company from nothing," he declared, pacing our living room. "You can't just take it away." "Actually, Grandpa built it," I corrected from the doorway. "You inherited it, just like you wanted Emma to inherit it." "That's different." She was willing to commit. No, she was willing to comply. "There's a difference." James, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "Mr. Bennett, I'm offering you a position on the advisory board. You'd still have input, just not the final say." Advisory board. My father's face reddened. "I'm Robert Bennett. I don't advise, I decide." "And that," I said softly, "is exactly why the company is failing." The party preparations continued amid the family drama. James and I had chosen the plaza's grand ballroom, sparing no expense. After all, it wasn't just an engagement celebration. It was a statement. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from extended family members, each choosing sides in the ongoing drama. "You're breaking your father's heart." "Aunt Patricia." "About time someone stood up to Uncle Robert." "Cousin Michael." "How could you do this to your sister?" "Mom's best friend, Susan." I ignored them all, focusing instead on the future James and I were building. The hospital board had just approved my proposal for a new neurosurgery wing, which Wilson Healthcare would help fund. We were creating something meaningful together, something that would save lives. A week before the party, my mother tried one last time. She came to my office, looking older than her years. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she said, sitting across from my desk. "About that night, about everything since." I continued reviewing patient files, not looking up. 8 years is a long time to think, Mom. "I know. I should have stood up to your father. I should have supported your dreams." Now I did look up. "Why didn't you?" She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. "Fear, I suppose. Fear of change, of conflict. It was easier to go along with what your father wanted." "And now?" "Now," she smiled sadly. "Now I'm afraid of losing my daughter forever. Both my daughters, actually. Emma's not handling this well. Emma's never handled anything well that she couldn't control. She's talking about moving to California," my mother continued. "Says there's nothing left for her here." "Maybe that would be good for her," I suggested, "to build something of her own for once." My mother looked surprised. "You'd really be okay with that? After everything?" "Mom, I never wanted to destroy Emma's life. I just wanted everyone to face reality. The company was failing. Emma's not cut out for running it, and I'm not the failure you all thought I was." She reached across the desk, hesitating before touching my hand. "I never thought you were a failure, Victoria. I was just too weak to fight for you." For the first time in 8 years, I saw my mother clearly, not as the woman who had failed to protect me, but as someone who had been trapped in her own way by my father's rigid expectations. "The party's next Saturday," I said finally. "If you come, if any of you come, it needs to be with the understanding that things have changed. I'm not that scared 18-year-old anymore." "No," she agreed, standing to leave. "You're so much more than we ever imagined you could be, and I'm sorry we couldn't see it sooner." The night before the party, James found me on our balcony, looking out over the city lights. "Second thoughts?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "No," I said, leaning into him. "Just thinking about how different everything is from what I imagined growing up." "Better or worse?" I turned in his arms to face him. "Different. I thought success meant making my father proud, proving I could be what he wanted. Instead, it meant becoming what I wanted and finding someone who loves that version of me. He kissed me softly. Speaking of versions of you, wait until they see your dress tomorrow night. I laughed, feeling the tension ease. You think that'll shock them more than the company takeover? Well, you do look killer in Valentino. As we stood there under the stars, I felt at peace with whatever tomorrow would bring. My family would either accept the new reality or they wouldn't. Either way, I had built something beautiful from the ashes of their rejection. My phone buzzed one last time. Emma, I'll be there tomorrow. We have a lot to talk about. Ready for one last family showdown? James asked, reading the message over my shoulder. I smiled, thinking of the scared teenager I'd been and the strong woman I'd become. Ready for anything. The plaza's grand ballroom sparkled with elegant sophistication on the night of our engagement party. As I stood in my Valentino gown, James's hand steady at my waist, I watched my family enter one by one. Emma came first, wearing a subdued black dress, so unlike her usual flashy style. She approached us slowly, something different in her expression. I've accepted a job in California, she said quietly, a junior marketing position at a startup. I think it's time I learned to build something of my own. I nodded, understanding the courage this admission took. Good luck, Emma. I mean that. My parents arrived next. My father looked older, humbled somehow. My mother's eyes welled with tears when she saw me. You look beautiful, she whispered, reaching out but stopping short of touching me. My father cleared his throat. Victoria James, I've been doing some thinking. About the company, about everything. He paused, struggling with the words. You were right, both of you. I was too stubborn to see what needed to change. James squeezed my hand supportively as my father continued. I'd like to accept that advisory board position, he said. If the offer still stands, maybe it's time I learned to listen instead of just deciding. I looked at my family, really looked at them. They weren't the perfect, infallible figures of my childhood, nor were they the monsters of my teenage trauma. They were just people, flawed and capable of both great hurt and genuine change. I'd like that, I said finally. A fresh start, for all of us. Later that night, as James and I shared our first dance, I caught glimpses of my new reality. Emma deep in conversation with a Silicon Valley investor, my father actually listening to James's board members about modernization plans, my mother proudly telling her friends about my medical career. Happy? James asked, spinning me under the crystal chandeliers. I thought about the long journey from that cold December night to this moment, about how sometimes losing a family leads to finding yourself, and how the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting better. More than happy, I replied. I'm at peace. Above us, the stars twinkled through the ballroom's glass ceiling, witnesses to an ending that was really just another beginning. Sometimes I realize that happiest endings come not from destroying what hurt us, but from building something beautiful despite it. My mother caught my eye across the room and raised her champagne glass with a small, hopeful smile. I nodded, raising mine in return. After all, every good doctor knows that even the deepest wounds can heal, with time, with care, and with the courage to begin again.